In this episode, I want to talk to you about something that every natural health enthusiast should be familiar with, and that is germ theory. If we don't understand germ theory and how it's used in the marketplace to push products on us, we'll be vulnerable to clever marketing campaigns to get us to buy their products and participate in practices that are contrary to a healthy lifestyle. I want everyone in the natural nation to understand the difference between germ theory and terrain theory so that when the clever marketing or the bad advice comes along, we won't get distracted and we'll stay on track with effective, healthy lifestyle habits that support a robust immune system. Let's talk about it. Welcome to the Christian Healthy Lifestyle Podcast, where I help Christians opt out of the medical matrix, cut through the noise, and embrace a natural health lifestyle the way God intended. I'm your host, David Sandstrom, and this is episode number 178. As we get started today, I want to give you a heads up. Some of the topics I'm going to cover today are somewhat controversial, so I've decided to redact or bleep out some of my statements. If you're watching the video version of this episode, you'll hear the beeps. If you want to hear the full unredacted version, listen on your favorite podcast listening platform. In the podcasting world, we still have free speech, but that's not true on all platforms. Now, germ theory is the idea that it's the germs in the form of viruses, bacteria, fungi, parasites that make us sick. Terrain theory says it's not so much the microbes that make us sick, it's the internal environment or a compromised immune system that makes us sick. The reality is, it's probably a little bit of both, but the medical community has gone headlong into germ theory. We saw that lived out with the pandemic. We can get ourselves into trouble if we blindly follow the official advice from I want to share a quick story. Early on in my flying career, I got my first multi-engine job. I was flying twin-engine planes. They were called the Cessna 402, and it was 9 passengers and single pilot. Well, one of the more experienced pilots told me before my first flight, he said, hey, when you're approaching to land, don't do what the book tells you to do. Don't use the manual and turn on your fuel pumps. Because if you do, down at sea level altitudes, you're going to flood those engines out with fuel and you're going to lose an engine. So I kind of nodded my head and said, okay. And I said to myself, I'm not going to go against the book manufacturer's recommendations. I'm going by the book. So on my first flight by myself, pull out the approach to landing checklist. It said fuel pumps on. So I turned the fuel pumps on. Guess what happened? I lost an engine. So I was able to get that engine restarted, but an engine failure in an airplane doesn't lead to good places. So I would have been better off listening to the advice of the experienced pilot that knew better than the official recommendations from the manufacturer. So the same thing is true with listening to the official recommendations from they could be very much wrong for a lot of different reasons. Now, during the pandemic, we were first told, then we were told, well, and then later we were told, I can tell you because I'm a geek and I research this stuff, but trying to stop is like trying to keep mosquitoes out with a chain link fence. It doesn't work. And when it comes to quarantines, for the first time in human history, we quarantined healthy people. We were told, closed businesses and schools being shut down. When it comes to we were told, then we were told, then we're told, and so on. And then finally we were told, but your symptoms won't be as severe. But they forgot to tell us that down the road, the people who got the most Now, all of that bad advice was centered around germ theory. Here's the trouble. We can't live in a bubble. We can't avoid being exposed to germs. As long as we're living and breathing on this planet, we will be exposed to germs. The question we should be asking is, what's the best way to defend ourselves from those germs? It's what happens after we get exposed is what's most important. Now, germ theory proponents would have us believe that our defenses against those germs are, for the most part, fixed. Probably genetics, and it's out of our control. Therefore, the only way to protect ourselves is with extreme measures of avoidance or some type of medical intervention with pills and shots. Now, I'm not against prudent avoidance. There are some nasty microbes out there. Parasites like Giardia or Cryptosporidium can be potentially life-threatening to a compromised individual. If we're out camping or hiking, we shouldn't drink unfiltered water from a stream or a river. That water is often contaminated with all kinds of undesirable microscopic organisms. The same is true with public hot tubs. I usually avoid those. We're probably better off avoiding those types of public situations. But living in fear of all invisible microbes is no way to go through life. The Bible tells us that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and love and a sound mind. Clever marketing agencies know that purchase decisions are largely made at an emotional level. And one of the more powerful motivating emotions is fear. So they'll use fear in their marketing campaigns to get us to buy and use their products. Those products include things like hand sanitizers, antibacterial soaps, and the like. Although each of those products may serve some purpose in certain situations, they all come with a downside. We could easily do a whole series of episodes on that topic. We can't possibly do that justice on a single episode. We can't cover it thoroughly here in this one episode. But let me say this. I'm a believer in informed consent. Every individual and parent should be able to make the decision as to whether or not to get a vaccine or vaccinate their children. But that decision needs to be an educated one. For starters, we sure want to know that thoroughly evaluated and tested for safety and efficacy. Now, I don't know about you, but as far as I'm concerned, any medical product that has been rushed to market with little to no testing in a frantic marketing campaign, I'm going to stay away from. There's preservatives in that are potentially harmful, but even worse than that, one of the bigger inherent problems with is they contain ingredients that stimulate a greater immune response. Those stimulants are called and they trigger the immune system to kick in a gear. Now, years ago, a common was mercury. Mercury is highly toxic. There's no safe level exposure of mercury. So when mercury was outlawed to aluminum and some other things, but also very toxic. I was flying on an airplane one time. I used to commute to work during my 35-year flying career. I'd spent most of that time commuting. And I was on an airplane one day, and there was a guy next to me reading a bunch of documents. And I was being a little nosy, and I leaned over and I looked at what he was reading, and he was reading some stuff on and I was just getting started in my research about back then. I had young children, and I wanted to know, what was going on here. So I said, hey, I noticed you're reading some stuff about what line of work are you in? He said, well, I'm a lawyer and a doctor. So, wow, that's interesting. I said, who do you work for? He said, I work for University of Miami, and I represent their interest in pharmaceuticals designed to be used as. So I said, okay, I got a big question for you. Do you have kids? He says, yeah, I do. I said, all right, here's a $64,000 question. He looked me straight in the eye and he said, not on the recommended schedule, not on your life. I said, why? He said, because like they recommend, you're going to severely overstimulate that child's immune system, and that's not a good thing. He wasn't opposed to it, but he told me he picks and chooses certain ones to use and certain ones to stay away from. I got the impression he stayed away from most of them. So here's the point. We should listen to both sides and make up our own minds as to whether or not we should get one. Okay, enough said on that topic. What about hand sanitizers? At first glance, it might seem like a good idea. What's wrong with washing germs off? Well, you're not really washing them off, you're just killing the bacteria. But hand sanitizers are primarily alcohol, and alcohol dries out the skin, and it disturbs the delicate microbial balance on our skin. The same is true with antibacterial soaps. Antibacterial soaps are just another type of antibiotics. Just as oral antibiotics destroy or carpet bomb the internal terrain of our gut microbiome, antibiotics in the form of antibacterial soap will destroy the delicate microbiome balance on our skin. In episode 125, I interviewed Dr. Yug Varma, who is a microbiologist, and we talked about the microbiome on our skin, and particularly how it affects acne. If that's a topic that interests you, I encourage you to go back and listen to episode 125. It helps to understand a little history behind germ theory. Germs were first discovered in the mid-1700s, but into the early 1800s, still very little was known or understood about microbes or pathogens. Then in 1861, a French biologist by the name of Louis Pasteur came along. You probably recognize his name from the term pasteurization. It's named after him. Now, Pasteur discovered that microbes caused fermentation, and germ theory really got a hold and it started taking off after that. But even then, there were competing theories. Another French biologist by the name of Antoine Bechamp was a rival of Louis Pasteur. He was a microbiologist as well, and he wrote a book called Blood and Its Third Anatomical Element. And Bechamp theorized that it wasn't so much the germs that make us sick. He said that the internal terrain, or the ability of that person to fight off those undesirable microscopic organisms, is what matters most. So here we are, more than 150 years later, and the debate is still going on. But the evidence is starting to pile up. It's the internal terrain that matters most. Now, contrary to popular belief, being exposed to germs, especially as a child, is actually very much health protective. So look at this study here. It's called Early Farm Exposure Mitigates Respiratory Illnesses, Allergies, and Skin Rashes. This study was published in the Journal of Allergy and Clinical Immunology. It compared 268 children ages 5 to 17 who lived on a dairy farm from birth to 5 years to 247 children who lived in a rural area but never lived on a farm. Here's what they found. Conditions that were significantly less common in farm-exposed children were allergic rhinitis and hay fever. The study found children born into dairy farms had much less severe respiratory illnesses during the first 2 years of life, 16% in farm infants compared to 31% in non-farm infants. These findings suggest that environmental exposure or other elements in the farming lifestyle help kids to be resistant to both allergies and viral respiratory illnesses. So that's one study. Let's look at another one. This one's entitled Genetics, Environment, Lifestyle Influence, Risks for Food Allergy Early in Life. Here's what they found. Early introduction to solid foods appears to have a significant impact, as the researchers cited the Learning Early About Peanut trial, which demonstrated how the early and sustained intake of peanuts could be protective against peanut allergy. Also, from the Inquiring About Tolerance study, found a 67% lower risk for food allergies with early introduction when children are aged 1 to 3 years. The growing adoption of westernized lifestyle that limits less industrialized exposure to microbial influences may contribute to increasing rates of food allergies and food sensitivities as part of the hygiene hypothesis, the researchers further found. So in other words, they found that contrary to popular belief that we should keep our children from being exposed to food allergens early in life, we actually want to expose them earlier in life, and that ends up being more health protective against food allergies and food sensitivities by a significant margin. Okay, here's another study. This one is called Linking the Gut Microbial Ecosystem with the Environment. Does gut health depend on where we live? And this study was published in the Frontiers in Microbiology in 2017. Here's what they found. Studies show that growing up in a microbe-rich environment, such as traditional farms, can have protective health effects on children. These health effects may be ablated due to changes in human lifestyle, diet, living environment, and environmental biodiversity as a result of urbanization. Importantly, if early life exposure to environmental microbes increases gut microbiota diversity by influencing patterns of gut microbial assembly, then soil biodiversity loss due to land use changes such as urbanization could be a public health threat. So what they're saying is children that grew up on farms and exposed to soil and animals and those kinds of things were healthier, and they had fewer problems with allergies later in life. And they go on to say that if that's true, then stripping the soil of its natural microbial content with commercial farming practices is a serious health concern. So what these studies are pointing to is that our modern lifestyles are forcing us to live in an unnatural environment, and that environment is harmful to our health. So is embracing germ theory and trying to make our environment as sterile as possible really a good way to build health? I would say that the answer to that question is unequivocally no. And do I have to say it? Jesus was born in a barn, and at that time, most people owned animals. So these researchers are confirming that God knows best. God gave our bodies a super intelligence. You see, we've got two sides to our immune system. We've got the innate immune response, which is our body's quick, general immune response that includes inflammation, and it protects us from any invader. And we've got the adaptive immune response, where our bodies learn how to recognize a particular germ or invader and mount a more effective immune response the next time we're exposed to that particular undesirable microscopic organism. Our modern lifestyles have removed us from the natural environment that we were designed to coexist with. We're basically living in a zoo. When we look at animals in the wild, we don't see chronic disease. We don't see things like obesity, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes. But put those animals in a zoo and we'll see their health declining. They may get to the point where they don't care about finding a mate or are even unable to reproduce. We're seeing that lived out in our society with male sperm count in humans declining 50 to 60% over the last 50 years. Take a look at this study here. This study was published in the journal Human Reproduction Update. It's called Temporal Trends in Sperm Count, a systematic review and meta-regression analysis. Here's what they found. In this comprehensive meta-analysis, sperm counts declined significantly among men from North America, Europe, and Australia during 1973 to 2011, with a 50 to 60% decline among men unselected by fertility, with no evidence of a leveling off in recent years. These findings strongly suggest a significant decline in male reproductive health, which has serious implications beyond fertility concerns. Research on causes and implications of this decline is urgently needed. You want to talk about an existential threat to human existence? This would be it. If this trend is not reversed, the human race will cease to exist. Could this be partly responsible for the gender confusion that we see everywhere these days? I don't know, but it's certainly worth taking a look at. Now, it's not genetics and it's not germs that are causing things like this. It's lifestyle factors. That's why I'm starting the Christian Healthy Lifestyle community. The community is going to be a place where we're surrounded with like-minded believers that are also natural health enthusiasts. And together, we can support one another on this journey to pursue abundant life through vibrant health and vitality. If you haven't already, I encourage you to get on the waitlist at chlpodcast.com/membership. Now, I'm not saying we need to build a cabin in the woods and live off the grid. I like some of our modern conveniences. I'm assuming you do too. I like having air conditioning in the summer and heat in the winter. I like having electricity and running water. I like having a car and a cell phone. But we should be taking steps to fight back against the onslaught of insults that have robbed us of our natural living environment. We should be living lifestyles that come alongside our body's natural mechanisms that promote health and well-being. We should be cooperating with our God-given design and living in harmony with it, not trying to work against it with drugs and surgery. Now, here's a few of my suggestions. Obviously, it's super important to have a robust, diverse gut microbiome. We get that by being exposed to all kinds of different bacteria. When we have a diverse, robust microbiome, our bodies will form a healthy mucosal barrier. The mucosal barrier in our guts is what protects us from the outside world. We've all seen a dog drink dirty water out of a puddle and not get sick. That's because dogs have a super strong mucosal barrier. Now, we'll never have the protection a dog has, but there are things we can do to promote healthy gut function. There's beneficial bacteria in fermented foods like kimchi, kombucha, yogurt, cheese. We should be consuming fermented foods on a regular basis. Now, if you've got a food sensitivity to dairy, focus on fermented vegetables. We should also be consuming the right kind of fiber that provides the food that those beneficial bacteria need in order to multiply. The fermentation of fiber in the gut produces beneficial short-chain fatty acids, particularly butyrate, that assists with proper digestion. Not only that, we should all be taking a quality probiotic supplement. But a supplement is just that, a supplement. Our diet and lifestyles are the primary drivers of our current state of health. If we're eating a standard American diet and living a standard American lifestyle and want to pop a few pills to make up for all that, we're just kidding ourselves. Another thing we can do to support our immune system is get a good night's sleep. Poor quality sleep has been shown in the medical literature to reduce natural killer T cells, which are a super important part of our immune response, including fighting off cancer. Poor sleep causes inflammation and decreases antibody response, which makes us more susceptible to infections. A lack of sleep also inhibits cytokine regulation. Now, cytokines are important proteins that contribute to an effective immune response. Another common lifestyle factor that acts in a similar fashion to poor sleep is eating high amounts of processed sugar and grains. A lot of people don't know this, but grains like rice, corn, and wheat can spike blood sugar after meals just as much, if not more, than a bowl of ice cream. Now, numerous studies show that a blood sugar spike after a sugary drink or a meal with lots of grains can compromise our immune system for several hours afterwards. Those compromises include neutrophil inhibition. Neutrophils are a type of white blood cell that fight off bacterial infections, as well as a reduction in total white blood cell count for up to 8 hours after consuming 100 grams of sugar. Now, 100 grams of sugar is roughly equivalent to a large soft drink and a burger and fries from any fast food restaurant. Sugar spikes after meals also promote whole body systemic inflammation. Now, systemic inflammation, again, compromises immune function. High blood sugar can also cause oxidative stress, which contributes to accelerated aging. It also compromises the gut microbiome by feeding yeast and the bad bacteria. So let's get back to germ theory. If you've been listening to this show for any length of time, you know it's my contention that our bodies have a God-given built-in intelligence, and our bodies know how to defend themselves. They know how to heal and to thrive. We've just got to get the obstacles out of the way. That way we build health margin and can better handle an illness. We are fearfully and wonderfully made, Psalm 139:14, and our bodies have a sophisticated immune system that's designed by God to defend us against would-be invaders. Of course, the idea that we have little to no control over our immune response fits right into the medical model of healthcare. You just cross your fingers and hope you don't get sick, and when you do, you go to the doctor and pick up some pills. Let's not fall victim to clever marketing campaigns. Let's stay focused on healthy lifestyle practices that are in harmony with our God-given natural design and not work against our design with drugs and surgery. Embracing the Christian healthy lifestyle means walking away from many of the things we see commonly practiced every day. Things like consuming 80 to 90% of our diet from processed foods, sedentary lifestyle, spending most of our time indoors. And if we do go outside, make sure we lather up with toxic sunscreen because the dermatologist told us that all sunlight is bad. Or taking unnecessary antibiotics when we have a viral infection because the doctor wants to make us feel like he did something for us. As believers, we're called to be different. We're called to be in the world, but not of the world. The Christian community is supposed to be a shining light of a city on a hill, a model of the way we should live our lives that's attractive to others. By embracing a Christian healthy lifestyle, we experience peace in the storm, more spiritual strength, more mental emotional fortitude, and better physical vitality. But putting things into practice can be easier said than done. Old habits don't go down without a fight. It's a lot easier to implement new healthy lifestyle habits when we're surrounded by a group of like-minded believers. That's why I'm starting the Christian Healthy Lifestyle community. Inside the community, you'll be surrounded by people on the same journey together, encouraging one another, celebrating victories, and experiencing positive accountability. Do yourself a favor. Get on the wait list today. Do it right now while it's top of mind. Go to chlpodcast.com/membership, fill out the form, and I'll be in touch with updates as launch approaches and your next steps. Now, don't miss next week's episode where I'll be sharing some mental toughness tips for reaching your health goals. That's it for now. Thank you for listening. I appreciate you. Go out there and live abundantly. I'll talk with you next time. Be blessed.